Hello everyone, my name is Vendetta. Today we have another TDX challenge for you. Today, as you probably can guess by the title of the video, we are doing Endless, but we're playing with bullet towers only. What does this challenge mean? Well, similar to my last video where I did explosives only, we're going to play Endless. However, we're only going to bring towers that use the bullet type damage. This challenge, I want to make it clear, is very difficult. It's a lot more difficult than it actually seems. You might think, no, it can't be that hard. It is that hard. It is very, very, very difficult. I cannot put it simpler. This challenge is brutal. I've honestly never been more infuriated by a challenge in TDX. This has just driven me absolutely insane. Now, another point I want to make clear. In this video, and in this challenge, I will be using helicopter. You might think, oh, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm using bottom path helicopter, and as some of you might know, bottom path helicopter still uses bullet. So, yeah, it should be okay, right? No, because bottom path helicopter has a passive ability where it shoots missiles. Those missiles are explosive damage, and therefore would be breaking the rules of this challenge. However, I have attempted this challenge for hours on end, multiple different attempts, different maps, different towers, different strategies, all kinds of different things. No matter what, I could not get further than like wave 30 without helicopter. So for that reason, to give you guys an actual video to watch, I will be using the helicopter, and that does do the explosive damage. However, it's not very much. That's all. That is all. So if you can try this challenge, I encourage you to. I encourage you to try this challenge without helicopter and see what you can get. Only use towers that use bullet damage and just see what score you can get. Trust me, it's a lot more difficult than it probably seems. One more thing before we get started. If you do enjoy this video, please consider dropping a like. I really appreciate your support, and it helps this channel grow. If you enjoy this video and you want to leave your opinions down in the comments, that is also greatly, greatly appreciated. I do love hearing what you have to say. And lastly, consider subscribing if you want to see more videos from this channel. The towers I will be using in today's challenge consists of the mobster. The mobster is going to help us increase our eco. The helicopter. The helicopter is, as I mentioned, our only real method of having enough damage and enough range to really get past any sort of decent wave in this challenge, so it's going to be our primary DPS, especially early on. We have the machine gunner, which is one of the only sources of splash for bullet. EDJ, which EDJ doesn't shoot any bullets, but it doesn't shoot any other kind of ammo, so therefore it is allowed. Juggernaut, of course, the obvious. This guy is the bullet tower. Of course we're going to bring him, especially because of the fact that Juggernauts can have more DPS than an XWM turret. And speaking of XWM turret, of course we're taking turrets. These things are amazing for their survivability. I begin the game with a machine gunner up on this little platform up here on this wood pallet. I've found that this is the best place to put a machine gunner to start, and I do like starting with the machine gunner. I could start with a mobster or go a few waves and try and skip until I can get a helicopter, but I decided machine gunner is my favorite to start with. We upgrade him a few times, and overall, we just slay the crowd. Machine gunner is very, very powerful, and it wasn't very good on its release, but after it got buffed a couple of times, it's finally a very good tower, and I actually really love the machine gunner. He's very fun to use. We get him to 2 and 2 levels on each path, and now he finally does pierce. This is exactly what we need, as the machine gunner will now do splash. We take down this disposalist. He wasn't really a big deal, and now we're aiming for the Browning machine gun. We can't do the laser MG path on the machine gunner. Sadly, it does have more DPS, but it does shoot laser bullets, so we're unable to go down that path. That's okay though. The Browning MG is very, very powerful, as it does get stealth detection, and it does very, very powerful DPS with 4 pierce on the max level. This wave with 3 disposalists come along, and it is a little bit scary, and I do leak a few enemies by here, but the helicopter I place does wrap it up very nicely. I continue upgrading my helicopter, getting it to a point where I can rely on it for more DPS. Right now, I want to get the helicopter maxed out on the bottom path, as I said before, the helicopter does shoot bullets on the bottom path, but unfortunately it does use explosives, so I upgraded to the Viper upgrade, and now it is much more powerful with 137 DPS. My helicopter and machine gunner work together to sweep out the rest of these waves. Honestly, without helicopter, this challenge is at least 5,000 times harder. Most of these waves are pretty simple and not too bad to clean up. With enough DPS, you can overall just overthrow most of these waves, even if there is things like mutant scientists and specters and all that. They finally sent in a guy with resistances of some kind, but it was no big deal since my helicopter and machine gunner were both quite powerful with at least 100 DPS by this point, and now I had just maxed out my helicopter, which does at least 500 DPS. I then decided to max out my machine gunner. I decided if he was going to be placed, then I might as well max him out so he has the big cone field of view. These revived mutant zombies came along, but of course they don't have bullet resistance, so unlike the explosive challenge where they caused a big problem for me, these guys did not cause any mayhem this time around. I upgraded my machine gunner to the max level at long last. Now he would do 5 targets damage worth of DPS at one time. I decided to work on more helicopters, and that is when Plague Doctor came along. The Plague Doctor is honestly really difficult for this challenge, but as I said before, helicopter is the only reason we can reliably get past this, or if you use a lot of machine gunners. We took the Plague Doctor down fairly easily using our high DPS and plenty of range. I placed another machine gunner, by the way. I think it's very vital to have a lot of these guys, as they do, again, the most splash that we can get our hands on. Tankier and tankier enemies were coming by, which was fine. I was fine with it since we were powering up through more machine gunners and more helicopters. This wave was a little bit spooky since there was kind of a lot of them, but again, I had no problem taking them down. By now, I had 3 machine gunners on the max level and 2 helicopters now maxed out as well. I was working on maxing on my 3rd when the revived Plague Doctor decided to show up. In all my attempts without helicopter, revived Plague Doctor would usually be the one to kill me, as if I could barely swing by the normal Plague Doctor, the revived Plague Doctor proved that I would have not nearly enough DPS, so with using the helicopter though, I was able to quickly take him down, and honestly, he looked like a joke compared to before. The money I got from the revived Plague Doctor allowed me to get many more helicopters, and now I had effectively doubled my helicopter count. Things were looking up, and my economy was increasing. My helicopter fleet gradually increased to be more and more, and now I was at 7 helicopters. That's when the Eradicator and his friends decided to show up. I had to be careful with this wave, as in some of my attempts before, I had forgotten completely about the avatars, and I also had my headphones off, so I just randomly died out of nowhere, and I was really confused. That's why I made sure to take care of the avatars first. Everything else in this wave went down pretty easily, except they did try to take down one of my machine gunners, so I did have to sell that first machine gunner I placed. Rest in peace. This reminds me of the artillery in my explosives only challenge. Eradicator and this last predator finally died, but I did manage to get my last helicopter placed, and I did get that machine gunner replaced, so we're all good here. Now that I had all of my helicopters placed, my new goal was to get as much DPS as possible through XWM turrets and Juggernauts. I decided to place an XWM turret on top of these crates. This wave with a bunch of specters came along, and it was kind of scary because they spawned a lot of guys, but it was fine. I had bigger worries, which at the moment was this wave with Eradicator Mark II and Mark I, and a bunch of avatars, of course. I had to keep baiting the Eradicator Mark II's attacks, which was not easy considering he had a lot of attacks that could easily wipe out big armies, and that's exactly what I was using to bait him. My 2 XWM turrets, though, that I now had were proving very useful. Each XWM turret had at least double the DPS of each helicopter, meaning there was effectively 2 more helicopters sitting for each turret I had. These Eradicators were a big problem as they kept taking out everything I had and they were not going down easily. Eradicator Mark II had a lot of health, so I had to keep baiting his attacks until he would finally go down, which didn't seem to be happening anytime soon. Mobster was my cheapest bait, but it does unfortunately have a placement limit of 9, so I had to be sparing with my bait. Eventually though, Eradicator Mark II fell, and we were back to chilling. I placed all my machine gunners back, of course, and then I decided to work on more DPS, like I had planned before. I was placing XWM turrets, but instead of what I usually do in packing them all in the same place to make sure I get every placement, I decided to spread them out so that when Eradicator Mark IV decided to bomb them with his mortar, they would not all take hits. Scarier enemies were coming by, like this wave with like 3 grumbles, which of course was pretty scary considering my biggest problem right now was lack of DPS, but we were able to clean it out. My back DPS was the biggest problem, as once enemies got roughly halfway through the map, they were past all of my defenses, so I needed to up my defenses at the back at some point. This guy was getting really close and it was really scary, but thankfully the helicopters can fly around, so it was okay as we did manage to take him out. Eradicator Mark IV came and I had to deal with the avatars first, as I mentioned before, since they're a pretty big problem, not having warship and all. My strategy of trying to get him to shoot the different turrets so that they wouldn't all take one hit was working and proving to be useful. He was going down, but I would prefer if he went down faster. We needed to stop him from killing as many turrets as possible, but unfortunately for this turret, he did lose all of his lives. Thankfully though, didn't manage to die as Eradicator Mark IV finally went down. Then I sold all of these guys that I used to bait his attacks and I decided to start placing Juggernauts. Juggernauts, you might think, are not as good as XWM turrets, however, that is just not true. Juggernaut is a very powerful tower for Endless, and I'll tell you why right now. Quite simply, Juggernaut, with the power of a top path DJ, has more DPS than an XWM turret. Now, you might think, well, that's just lame because XWM turret has more range, and it has flight detection, and it has ignore bullet resistance, and it has rebuilds. While yes, that's true, XWM turret is nowhere near as good in terms of the cost efficiency. So I managed to place a ton of Juggernauts here with a handful of mobsters in the mix, just to improve that economy a little bit. The Juggernaut's cost efficiency was proving to be a very useful idea, as I was taking out these waves pretty easily now. Even with anti-golems and ravages and all that coming through, things were going well. I placed as many Juggernauts as I could before it would not let me in that area anymore, and honestly, things were looking great. We had lots of DPS, and the XWM turrets had lots of lives, so we were chilling. I used my mobsters to get a lot of money off of these anti-golems. My eco was doing good, I had lots of DPS, things were great. Until Eradicator Mark I combat came along, and this guy sucked. He took out a lot of my Juggernauts, and he was not nice about it. I tried placing more turrets to take him down quickly, and resorted to placing my Juggernauts later, but of course that did not work out. I needed more DPS quick with the amount of money I had, so I had to place as many Juggernauts as I could quick to take him down faster. He wiped out a lot of the Juggernauts, healed right before he died, and then he finally died. I managed to place everything back without major problems, but it was kind of scary when I looked down and there was like only 10 Juggernauts and they were all trying to shoot these like really fat anti-golems. So yeah, I kind of panicked and I had to place a lot of these guys pretty quick. After all, Juggernauts are probably stronger than you expect. After replenishing my Juggernaut horde, everything was looking up again. These anti-golems were starting to be problematic as they were sending more and stronger anti-golems. However, I continued to put up a fight, not letting down, as I would need to prove that I could at least get to my goal of wave 100. Last time my goal was wave 130 for our explosives challenge, but I was not as confident this time as this challenge is brutally hard, so wave 100 seemed like a good goal to shoot for. These avatars were kind of annoying, and I realized that this Eradidog was actually getting kind of close, so he was kind of scary, but other than that, we were all good. Very, very, very strong enemies came by now, and I was using my mobster to try and get as much money as I could from them, which was proving to be very worthwhile, as I could place a lot of towers now. I decided to put a lot of Juggernauts up here on the top path just because they had a lot of range, and why not? So this multiplier guy came along, which was fine. First I worked on finishing off that multiplier guy, then I had to fight for my life with Juggernaut replacements, mobster targeting, and of course Apex Predator just wiping through everything I had. We took down his army of predators first, but then he continued to wipe out a lot of my Juggernauts with his flamethrower attacks, I-beams, and all kinds of missiles. He wiped out all those Juggernauts I put on top of those crates earlier, which was kind of unfortunate, but that wasn't my biggest worry at the moment, since he was honestly wiping out pretty much everything else. Thankfully though, he did go down, and I had the opportunity to replace. I don't know how he hit my EDJ there.
That's quite big.
He just kind of blew up the EDJ from like up way far away. I don't know how he did that. That was crazy. Anyways, I kept replacing my Juggernauts, making sure I had enough to go around and making sure I had enough to fight Calamity. Calamity was going to be my biggest worry since, of course, Splash is a problem with Bullet. So I set up a lot of back defense right here, and then, of course, continued working on my Juggernauts. In this challenge, you have to be very mindful of the back, as you don't have much to protect you, like warship or spawner towers, so it's very difficult sometimes. However, it was okay though, because Helicopter, if you're paying attention, is very, very good at this. They sent a lot of Erratadogs, which Erratadogs are normally very scary for this, and they were kind of scary, but they didn't get past my fleet of Juggernauts. My screen was dimming a red color, which was very unfortunate, as Calamity was drawing near. I knew this guy was going to be an absolute nightmare. That's when I decided to set up a lot of machine gunners right here to try and take down a lot of his summons very quickly. I knew it wouldn't be the most effective, but maybe it could help a little bit in trying to take down these summons. I also replaced all these Juggernauts back since I figured they might be helpful, but that's when I realized they actually don't have Pierce. I thought Juggernaut on the top path had Pierce, but I guess I confused it with the Golden Juggernaut instead. However, that was not the time to worry about that. For now, Calamity was here, and little did I realize, I underestimated this guy. He is brutal, and on this challenge, with barely any splash to go around, yeah, Calamity is pretty brutal. I tried saving myself with a lot of machine gunners, however, it didn't take long for me to be overrun. Despite my spamming of machine gunners, Calamity had claimed victory, and we had lost at wave 79. All in all, I'm proud of this. It might not sound like it, and it might not seem like it, but I am very proud of this record. Wave 79 was the furthest I had gotten in a long, long time. The previous record I had was maybe wave 40. I cannot emphasize once again just how frustrating this challenge is. If you think I am exaggerating, or maybe it's just a skill issue that I only could get to wave 80, please, I beg of you, go try this for yourself. If you want to see just how difficult it is, this is definitely something for you. It is nightmarishly hard, especially without the helicopter. So once again, if you or anyone else you know can do this challenge and get a better record than me, please leave a comment down below. I would love to see how far you can go in this. But with that, that's going to be all I have for you in today's video. Thank you all for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you want to see more, drop a comment, let me know what you think. There will be another video next week on Friday, so make sure to drop by if you want to see what that is. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye!